Welcome back, dreamy time travelers, to Snooze Through Time, the show where we unravel history gently enough to help you drift off, but vividly enough that your subconscious might emerge knowing how to barter for grain. Tonight, we begin another yawn-stretching journey. This time, we're diving into the often muddy, occasionally heroic, and frequently uncomfortable life of medieval men, from noble heirs with too much velvet to dirt-covered peasants whose hobbies included ploughing and dying early. As always, this is not just a history lesson. It's a sleepy saga filled with crusades no one fully understood, beards of questionable hygiene, and enough chainmail-related chafing to make you squirm in your blanket. We'll follow three fictional but vibe-accurate characters through childhood, adulthood, and the dignified sprint toward medieval retirement. So dim your mental torches, tuck yourself into your hay-stuffed mattress, and let's begin. Part 1: Childhood. Across the classes. Tiny tunics and big expectations. Ah, childhood. That magical phase of life when the world is full of wonder, potential, and livestock-related chores. In medieval Europe, being a child wasn't quite the whimsical frolic through meadows that modern Instagram posts would have you believe. It was more of a trial run for surviving adulthood with fewer teeth and no sense of irony. Let's meet our three tiny time travelers. Sir Theobald, our baby noble. Baby Theo was born into privilege, which in the Middle Ages meant your bathwater wasn't reused by 8 other people. He came screaming into the world beneath an embroidered canopy, surrounded by servants, a suspiciously calm midwife, and a priest already prepping the baptism. From birth, Theobald's destiny was laid out like a feast table. Learn Latin, memorize heraldry, avoid peasants, die gloriously in war, or mildly of gout. At the tender age of 3, he was being groomed for knighthood, because nothing says childhood development like being handed a wooden sword and told to whack the tutor. Education came from monks, who were equal parts teachers and guilt connoisseurs. If Theobald misbehaved, he'd get a stern lecture about eternal damnation and bad posture. Playtime? Oh yes, if you count jousting practice and falconry lessons as play. Fun was just training disguised with feathers. Roger the Cooper, the middle-class kid with calluses. Roger was born into a working family. His father, a cooper, barrel maker. His mother, a woman whose hobbies included baking bread and not being arrested for witchcraft. As a child, Roger was both a worker and a future apprentice. By the age of 5, he could already distinguish between 12 types of wood and 3 types of village gossip. He spent his days hauling things that were slightly too heavy for his height, playing with other children in the mud, and occasionally in things they hoped were mud, and learning that barrels are forever. Formal schooling was rare, but he might have picked up some letters from a local cleric if his family scraped together enough coins. Otherwise, education came from watching, doing, and being yelled at in increasingly exhausted tones. Roger's fun involved games made from sticks, rocks, and aspiration, and if he was really lucky, someone would throw him a pig bladder balloon on Saint's Day. Wolf the peasant, the child who had a full-time job by age 6. Baby wolf, sweet, scrappy wolf. Born in a thatched hut with more smoke than oxygen, Wolf's welcome into the world involved a midwife, a fire, and a goat standing way too close. His family was part of the great unwashed backbone of the kingdom, also known as the people who did literally everything. Wolf's early years were a combo of survival training and involuntary labor camp. He learned to herd sheep before he learned to count. He shared a bed with 3 siblings and a chicken, and his idea of a treat was not getting lice that week. Toys, a rounded rock was a luxury, sticks were cherished, mud pies were fine dining. His idea of fun included scaling forbidden objects, narrowly escaping angry geese, and pretending to be a knight, right up until the local lord galloped past and reminded him very loudly to stay in his peasant lane. He didn't attend school, but he was highly proficient in key local phrases like, "Hands off that," "Mind the cow," and "Run, the bailiff's coming." Childhood ends suspiciously early. Childhood in the Middle Ages wasn't a phase. It was more of a loading screen for adult responsibilities. By 7 or 8, most boys were already working or training for something. Theobald was shipped off to another noble house to become a page, which meant he now had to shine other knights' armor while absorbing deeply passive-aggressive chivalry. Roger began apprenticing under his father, spending more time in a woodshop than sleeping. And Wolf, he started carrying buckets for grown men, chasing pigs out of gardens, and learning that the true meaning of manhood was never sit down unless you're dead. And just like that, the childhood chapter closed. Time to awkwardly stumble into puberty with no deodorant and too many expectations. Part 2, Adolescence. Sweat, apprenticeships and bad haircuts. Adolescence. That glorious medieval phase where voices crack, limbs flail, and the crushing weight of societal expectations lands squarely on your uneven shoulders. Puberty was not kind in a time without mirrors or shampoo, but that didn't stop it from hitting like a catapult full of armpit hair. Sir Theobald, puberty with a side of chivalry. At age 7, Theobald was sent off to another noble household to become a page, which is fancy medieval speak for tiny but enthusiastic servant with ambition. He fetched things, he polished armor, he learned courtly manners and, more importantly, how to bow without falling over. By 14 he graduated to squire, which meant cleaning your knight's chainmail and emotional baggage, learning to fight with actual weapons, not just breadsticks at dinner, and being told constantly to die for honor without actually knowing what honor was. Theobald's adolescence was a delicate dance between swordplay, horniness, and Latin poetry. If he had a crush, he'd write her a sonnet and then duel someone for looking at her ankles. He didn't have acne cream, but he did have religious guilt, so that's basically the same thing. Roger the Cooper, apprentice by day, hormonal by night. By the age of 12, Roger was fully locked into his apprenticeship with his father, or if the family was ambitious, with a wealthier artisan. This meant 12-hour work days, sawdust in every bodily crevice, and learning the fine art of pretending to care when a master craftsman explained barrel symmetry for the 47th time. Roger's social life revolved around the market square, communal baths, awkward, and the occasional festival where he could fail spectacularly at dancing. Dating was theoretically possible, but tricky when your idea of romance was offering someone a slightly rounder wooden lid. Still, hormones found a way. He didn't have a diary, but he absolutely had opinions, many of which he carved into scrap wood and pretended were practice. Wolf the peasant, hormones, hard labor, and zero privacy. Wolf hit puberty like a falling sack of flour, loud, messy, and everyone noticed. He worked in the fields full-time, which meant long days hoeing, ploughing, and wishing he was somewhere else. His body grew faster than his clothes, so he was often stuck in a tunic that screamed crop top meets chaos. Adolescence in the village meant working beside grown men who never stopped reminding you that your back posture was shameful, crushing on girls you saw twice a month at church and didn't speak to until marriage negotiations started, and learning, very quickly, how to dodge farm animals, taxes, and unsolicited advice from your mother. No books, no mentors, just sweat, superstition, and the occasional miracle if you didn't get ringworm. But Wolf was resilient. He started to understand the land, learned how to flirt using turnip metaphors, and even got his own pair of boots, used of course, but full of hope. Transitioning to manhood, sort of. By the end of adolescence, say 15 to 18 if they made it that far, our boys had become men, technically. Theobald was probably off to his first battle, armoured like a shiny tin can with emotional issues. He'd been trained to fight, to serve, and to repress everything that could be considered a feeling. Roger was ready to become a journeyman, no longer an apprentice, not quite a master, but officially allowed to say, "We definitely didn't do it like that in our workshop." Wolf was basically a full adult now, possibly married, definitely overworked, and increasingly convinced that the village goose had it out for him. Adolescence in the Middle Ages wasn't about finding yourself. It was about finding some bread, some pants, and some way to survive. Adulthood without getting drafted, taxed, or trampled. And with that, it's time for the next phase of life. Young adulthood. When our lads try to find purpose, maybe a spouse, and hopefully not die in a field. Part 3, Young Adulthood, Marriage, War, and the Sudden Importance of Cows. Ah, young adulthood. That phase when you think you're invincible, but also cry when bread prices rise. For medieval men, this was peak, "Behold, I am a man" era, fueled by dreams of glory, mounting financial panic, and the emotional depth of a soggy turnip. Our trio has hit their late teens to mid-20s. They've got ambition, they've got raging hormones, and they've definitely got dental situations best described as historically accurate. Sir Theobald, the knight with daddy issues and a sword. Now in his early 20s, Sir Theobald has been knighted. This means two things. He now owns slightly better armor. He's expected to kill someone over family honor, land disputes, or a royal eyebrow raise. Being a knight in this era isn't all jousts and romantic glances. It's travelling to fight in wars that you're 60% sure are for God and 40% for someone's cousin's grudge, trying to collect taxes from peasants who throw potatoes at you, and being reminded constantly that you must marry strategically, which usually means someone with a strong dowry and a family crest featuring aggressive birds. Theobald marries Lady Mildred, a noblewoman with sharp cheekbones and no interest in his poetry. They have 2 kids, 1 dog, and 0 deep conversations. But hey, his castle has tapestries now. Emotionally, he's crumbling. Publicly, he's perfect. Internally, he's still mad that his squires never clean his helmet properly. Roger the Cooper, barrel maker, taxpayer, reluctant romantic. Roger is now a journeyman cooper, which is kind of like being a freelance barrel influencer. He can travel for work, rent a room in someone's attic, and loudly say things like, "You call this oak grain?" Eventually, Roger returns to his hometown, sets up his own workshop, and starts making a name for himself by crafting wine barrels so tight they made monks weep. He marries Agnes, a practical woman with 4 arms. Strong enough to churn butter and intimidate the clergy, their courtship was a slow burn of passing glances at the bakery, helping each other during festivals, and a single romantic walk that involved stepping over 2 pigs and a suspicious puddle. Roger's adult life revolves around work, taxes, trying not to get conscripted for war, and ensuring that his children know which side of the barrel is up. He has calluses, mild back pain, and quiet dreams of retiring near a stream. Wolf the peasant, the husband, the father, the human plough. By 18, Wolf is fully responsible for a plot of land the size of a generous picnic blanket. He works from sunup to sundown, and his social calendar consists of church, more work, and at one time a sheep got into the bakery and everyone talked about it for a week. He marries Ada, a childhood acquaintance, whose dowry included a chicken and 2 spoons. Their wedding feast lasted 5 hours and was considered lavish because someone brought a pie. Wolf's adult life includes repairing his thatched roof every time it looks at him funny, trying to strike deals with local lords who couldn't, point to his village on a map, even if you bribed them with their own wine, and learning that cows are both his greatest asset and greatest enemy. War? Oh yes, Wolf might be called up to fight. He'd be given a pointy stick and sent into battle, next to someone named Godric the Sweaty. If he survives, he gets a broken leg and a handshake. Still, Wolf finds moments of joy. His daughter giggles when the goats chase him. His wife sings old songs while weaving. And once, a travelling friar said he had kind eyes. He'll be thinking about that until he dies. The pressure of marriage and fatherhood. In medieval society, a man wasn't a real man until he was married and producing heirs, or at the very least, taxes. Expectations included being a provider even if you were barely surviving, defending your household even if you were scared of horses, and never ever crying unless it was about a really good harvest. Each of our lads is now navigating marriage, fatherhood, and the creeping realization that they're turning into their dads. They may not have modern worries, but they've got feudal lords, mystery illnesses, and the ever-present threat of surprise fire. But adulthood in the Middle Ages wasn't just about work, it was about status. And soon our men will enter the next phase, where their identity settles like old bread crusts, middle age. Part 4, Middle Age. Land, legacy, and lower back pain. Middle age in the Middle Ages. The phase where you're no longer trying to prove yourself. You're just trying to make it to the next winter without throwing out your spine. At this point, our lads have survived childhood, adolescence, and the hormonal tornado of young adulthood. Congratulations! They are now respectable, responsible, and really into land ownership. Let's check in with our trio of time-worn gentlemen. Sir Theobald, the jaded lord with a stiff neck and a stiffer honour code. Theobald is now in his 40s, which in medieval noble years is roughly ancient war wizard. He walks with a limp thanks to a jousting mishap involving a sheep, and he complains loudly about how real knights used to fight. His time is spent managing his estate, yelling at servants and brooding from balconies. He has a wife who tolerates him, 3 heirs with names like Geoffroy, Baldwin, and Sir Screams-a-Lot, the youngest, and a deepening existential dread every time. He sees a younger knight polishing a sword too enthusiastically. He now hosts feasts instead of attending them. He gives speeches about chivalry that sound suspiciously like passive-aggressive jabs at his neighbours. His hobbies include falconry, drinking wine too early in the day, and rearranging furniture no one is allowed to touch. Roger the Cooper, the dad, the legend, the back brace. Roger is now a master cooper. He has an apprentice, a thriving barrel business, and a firm belief that kids these days don't respect craftsmanship. He spends his days making barrels, complaining about how he has to make barrels, and loudly offering unsolicited advice to every teenager within yelling distance. Roger's wife Agnes now runs half the business while also running the entire household. Their children are neither apprenticed, out or already married. One of them tried becoming a minstrel, but Roger refuses to talk about it. Roger owns his own home now. He has enough money for meat more than once a week. He is, by medieval standards, absolutely killing it, even if his joints make noises like a haunted pantry door. He's respected in the community, especially by those who've tried lifting one of his barrels and immediately regretted it. Wolf the peasant, the grizzled veteran of field and fire. Wolf is now in his 40s, which for a peasant means he's basically a walking miracle. He has a permanent sunburn, a weatherproof face, and the uncanny ability to predict rain using only his knee. He's fathered several children, most of whom are now old enough to complain about how hard their lives are, while Wolf chuckles darkly in the background. Wolf owns a cow, a plough, and a deep personal hatred of fences. His wife Ada is still the love of his life, and also the person who tells him when to stop arguing with geese. His middle age consists of working every day, but slightly slower now. Getting visited by tax collectors with very smug faces and trying to keep his children from stepping in the same manure piles he did. Wolf has never seen a castle, but he's seen life. He's buried friends, survived floods, and once chased off a wolf using only a ladle and a war cry that lives on in village. The man in his prime, give or take a hernia. Middle-aged men in the Middle Ages were focused on land, or at least the illusion of owning it, legacy, preferably something that didn't involve gout, and survival. This was the age of passing things on. Skills, land, property, trauma. The dream was to have something to leave behind, besides debts and suspicious mushrooms in the pantry. Sir Theobald prepares his eldest son to take over the estate, but quietly worries that the boy has too much poetry in him. Roger trains his apprentice and starts thinking about retiring, but just thinking, he'd never actually do it. Wolf teaches his sons how to till, how to tell time by the sun, and how to survive when you've only got turnips and a broken shovel. They are no longer boys. They are no longer new men. They are the establishment, as worn as the roads they walk, but still here. And now we enter the final stretch. Part 5, Old Age, Legacy, Lumbago, and Looming Mortality. Old age in the Middle Ages, a rare achievement. If you made it past 50, congratulations. You are now a community elder, a repository of wisdom, and an involuntary sleep aid for younger people. Let's take one last look at our trio, now older, slower, and suspiciously fond of turnip soup. Sir Theobald, the ornamental knight with stories and gout. Sir Theobald is in his late 60s. He no longer rides into battle. He now sits near battle, commenting on people's footwork and complaining that armour isn't what it used to be. He walks with a cane that may or may not be decorative. He hosts banquets where he tells the same 3 stories, 2 of which involve dragons that definitely didn't exist, and one that ends with him fainting into a moat. Theobald's wife has taken up embroidery and ignoring him, while his children jockey for inheritance rights like vultures in silk shirts. He spends his days writing stern letters to younger nobles, judging everyone from his high-backed chair, and whispering regrets to a tapestry only he understands. In his heart, Theobald still sees himself as the brave knight, but now, instead of slaying enemies, he slays cheese platters and bedtime by 7 p.m. Roger the Cooper, retired, respected, and slightly racist about barrels. Roger is officially retired, which mostly means he watches other people make barrels and mutters about how they're doing it wrong. He has grandchildren now, and they all know not to sit in his chair unless they want a full lecture on wood grain. His hands are twisted by decades of work, but his memory is sharp, especially when it comes to who still owes him money from that cider order in 1328. Agnes, still sharp as a tack, has taken to organizing church events and reminding Roger that he's not allowed to die until the roof is fixed. His legacy is real. His barrels outlived some kings. His children run the business now. And every now and then a young apprentice asks him for advice, and he pretends to grumble before offering it proudly. He's a living monument and a deeply suspicious napper. Wolf the peasant, grandpa goose wrangler, and local oracle. Wolf has survived it all: famine, floods, and one seriously miscalculated bonfire. Now in his 60s, or maybe older, no one kept track, Wolf is considered a village treasure. Children gather around him to hear stories. Most involve cows doing things cows shouldn't do, and one involves a haunted outhouse. His wife Ada still runs the household with quiet power, and together they enjoy small joys. Watching the sunrise, making root stew, and yelling at chickens for moral support. Wolf no longer farms, he oversees, which mostly means sitting under a tree with a dog that only listens to him and occasionally giving advice so cryptic it feels like a riddle. He's mourned friends, outlasted rivals, and, miraculously, raised children who still visit and grandkids who show up with eggs and muddy boots. He never had riches, but he's got stories. And in this world, that counts as a legacy. The final years, dignity, decay, and random church donations. Old age in the medieval world was less about retirement and more about reflection. If you were lucky, you had a warm fire, a family who didn't sell your things early, and a priest who didn't interrupt your naps. Our three men faced their twilight years like true medieval men. Sir Theobald, buried with full honours, a sword, and probably an exaggerated eulogy. Roger, mourned by barrel makers for miles and given a farewell feast featuring one slightly tipsy monk. Wolf, remembered in his village as the man who outlived the Rat King, and honoured with a song that's still sung by locals with suspiciously tearful eyes. Their lives were hard, strange, sometimes hilarious, and undeniably human. As our trio fades into the warm candlelight of memory, half blind, half deaf, and wholly over the drama, it's easy to think this is where our story ends. But no, dear listener, we're not letting you off the hay-stuffed mattress just yet. Before we snuff out the torch, let's meet a few actual men from medieval history who didn't just survive their era, they left a scroll-sized mark on it. Prepare yourselves for medieval MVPs, real guys, real grit, less plaque. Rodrigo Diaz de Vivar, El Cid. Castilian knight, military leader, and poster child for chaotic good in medieval Spain. He fought both Christian and Muslim forces because loyalty, like fashion in the 11th century, was flexible. He reclaimed Valencia and became such a legend that Spanish epic poetry basically turned him into a medieval superhero. Unlike Sir Theobald, El Cid actually won battles, and unlike Wolf, he didn't have to chase his own chickens for dinner. William Marshall. If you've ever wished knights were more competent than dramatic, meet William Marshall, the real deal. Born the fourth son, aka Inheritance Who, he clawed his way up to become England's regent and the ultimate knight. He survived 5 kings, won countless tournaments, and served with more loyalty than a golden retriever in chainmail. Imagine if Sir Theobald had a LinkedIn, William Marshall would be his aspirational connection. Roger Bacon. Now for something more intellectual. Roger Bacon. A Franciscan friar with the curiosity of 10 cats and the social skills of a damp scroll. He championed science before it was cool, experimenting with optics, mathematics, and alchemy. He was basically a one-man medieval research lab, constantly pushing boundaries. The kind of guy who'd yell at Roger the Cooper for using a ruler instead of a compass. Gerbert of Aurillac, Pope Sylvester II. Before he wore the Pope hat, Gerber was a monk, scholar, and early tech bro. He introduced Europe to Arabic numerals, the astrolabe, and probably way too many long-winded lectures. Becoming Pope Sylvester II, he blended science and religion at a time when most people couldn't read. Basically, he's what would happen if Wolf had access to a library, a telescope, and a lot more free time. Ferrando from the Decameron. Okay, this guy's fictional. But Ferrando, the bumbling peasant from Boccaccio's Decameron, is a medieval mood. He's tricked into thinking he died, goes to purgatory, and ends up changed for the better. He's superstitious, stubborn and sweet like Wolf after half a jug of ale. Ferrando represents the everyday man's ability to change, survive, and maybe even become a better person after some extreme spiritual gaslighting. So, what did it mean to be a man in the Middle Ages? It meant navigating a world of impossible odds with cracked hands and stubborn hearts. It meant war, work, family, and a lifetime of trying to make sense of your role in a world ruled by kings, storms and soup. From the dusty road to the draughty castle, to the overgrown cottage by the woods, the life of a medieval man was full of struggle and full of story. And now that you've drifted through time with us, maybe you understand it just a little more. Or maybe you're asleep. Either way, mission accomplished. And that, dear time drifters, concludes our slow-motion stumble through another century of questionable decisions and medieval smells. If your eyes are still open, congrats. You're tougher than most knights. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the notification bell like it just insulted your pig. Leave a comment down below. Maybe tell us which century you'd survive in, or which one would immediately eat you for being too sarcastic. Until next time, keep dreaming weird, keep napping historically, and remember, if you're going to time travel, bring snacks. Good night and good nap.